what Seneca can teach you about living without fear. Fear, the silent predator that hunts from within. It lurks in the corners of your mind, seizing moments of peace, stealing hours of sleep, and whispering lies about what you should be afraid of. And yet, it is not the world that enslaves us. It is the chains we forge in our own minds. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, understood this truth better than most. His writings echo with a fierce clarity that pierces through the fog of doubt and uncertainty, teaching us how to live without fear. Today, we must confront what we dread, not by avoiding it, but by mastering it. Before we start, if this video resonated with you, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It helps others discover these powerful Stoic teachings. And if you're committed to mastering your mind and living fearlessly, subscribe to the channel. Join our community, where we explore timeless wisdom and grow stronger together. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss out on the journey ahead. And the illusion of control. In life, much of our suffering stems from a simple but profound misunderstanding: the belief that we have control over things we never actually do. This illusion of control breeds anxiety, frustration, and most of all, fear. We try to control outcomes, people, even fate itself, as though the world will bend to our will if we simply try hard enough. But Seneca, in his wisdom, saw through this delusion. He understood that fear takes root when we cling to the false belief that life can be controlled. Seneca once said, "Fate leads the willing and drags along the reluctant." In this, he speaks to the idea that when we accept what is beyond our control, we are led by fate with grace and peace. But when we resist, when we fight against the natural flow of life, we are dragged, bruised, and beaten. Fear thrives in this resistance, in the gap between our expectations and reality. We fear because we want control over things that are inherently uncontrollable: death, the future, the opinions of others, and the twists of fortune. A true Stoic lives free from this illusion. We can only control our thoughts, our actions, and our responses to the world around us. Everything else, the chaos of life, the inevitability of death, the randomness of fortune, is beyond our influence. When we internalize this, the grip of fear loosens. We stop fearing failure, for failure itself is not under our control. We stop fearing loss, for what we fear to lose was never truly ours to keep. By surrendering this illusion of control, we free ourselves from the constant fear of what might happen. We learn to live with a deep acceptance of whatever comes, trusting in our own ability to face it. As Seneca advised, "Throw me to the wolves, and I will return leading the pack." The Stoic does not fear what the world throws at them, because they understand that their power lies in their inner strength, not in controlling the uncontrollable. Fortitude in the face of adversity. Adversity is the crucible that shapes us. For many, the prospect of suffering fills the heart with dread. The mere thought of hardship, whether it's losing a job, facing illness, or encountering failure, paralyzes us with fear. But Seneca reminds us that adversity is not an enemy, it is a teacher. It is through trials and hardships that we discover our inner strength, our capacity to endure, and our potential to overcome. Seneca taught that the only true misfortune is to be untested. He said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." For he is not permitted to prove himself. This Stoic mindset transforms our perception of challenges. Rather than seeing adversity as something to fear, we must see it as an opportunity, a forge where our fortitude is strengthened. The Stoic does not shy away from difficulty, they welcome it, for they know it is through hardship that true character is built. Consider this: we fear adversity because we believe it will break us. But what if we shifted our thinking? What if instead we believed that adversity was a necessary part of growth, that without it we would never develop the resilience and strength that define true inner power? Adversity, Seneca tells us, reveals what we are capable of. It strips away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves and forces us to confront our real strength or lack thereof. Stoics do not seek out suffering for its own sake, but neither do they flee from it. When faced with hardship, we stand firm. We do not allow fear to dictate our response. We do not retreat. Instead, we use the challenge as an opportunity to practice fortitude, to rise above the situation. not by avoiding pain or discomfort, but by enduring it with grace and strength. As Seneca reminds us, fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men. In the same way that gold is purified in fire, so too is the Stoic refined by adversity. The fear of suffering, of loss, or of hardship is rooted in a misunderstanding of our own resilience. We fear that we are not strong enough to handle the weight of life's burdens. But as we confront these trials, we come to realize that we are far more capable than we believed. And in this realization, fear dissolves, replaced by a quiet, steady confidence in our own fortitude. The world will throw obstacles in our path, this much is certain. But the Stoic does not tremble before them. Instead, we embrace these moments of adversity as chances to prove ourselves, to cultivate strength, and to demonstrate the depth of our character. When we face life with this attitude, fear has no place in our hearts. Adversity becomes a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. The impermanence of life. Life, in all its beauty and complexity, is fleeting. One of the central sources of fear in our lives is our refusal to accept this simple, yet profound truth. We live as though time is abundant, as though the people we love, the things we cherish, and the comforts we enjoy will last forever. But Seneca, with the clarity of a seasoned philosopher, urges us to open our eyes and recognize the impermanence of life, not to terrify us, but to liberate us. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." This sentiment strikes at the heart of why so many of us live in fear of time running out, fear of losing what we have, and fear of change. We waste time because we believe it is endless, squandering our days in pursuit of things that offer temporary pleasure while fearing their inevitable end. The impermanence of life is not a curse, it is a gift. When we come to grips with the fact that nothing lasts forever, we begin to see life for what it truly is, a series of moments, each precious in its own right. The fear of losing what we have fades when we realize that loss is an inherent part of the cycle of life. We fear death, yet death is the very thing that gives life its urgency and meaning. In his writings, Seneca implores us to embrace the present moment, for that is the only thing we truly possess. He said, "Begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life." When we live in this way, fear of the future, of what might be lost, of the inevitable passage of time, begins to dissolve. The Stoic mind does not dwell on the impermanence of things with dread, but with a deep sense of peace. We know that life is short, but rather than lamenting this fact, we seize each moment, fully present, fully alive. The impermanence of life teaches us to let go of attachment. We fear loss because we are attached to people, to material possessions, to fleeting pleasures. But when we accept that everything we hold dear is transient, we become free. Free to love deeply without clinging, free to enjoy without needing to possess, free to live without the constant shadow of fear hanging over us. Seneca's wisdom calls us to embrace the impermanence of life, not as a source of fear, but as a pathway to true freedom. When we stop fearing the end of things, we begin to appreciate the beauty of each passing moment. The inevitability of change, of loss, and of death is not something to dread, but something to be welcomed with open arms, for it reminds us to live fully and without hesitation. Let us live in such a way that, when the end comes, we do not look back with regret, but with the peace of knowing we truly lived. Mastery over emotions. Our emotions are powerful forces, capable of shaping our experiences and dictating our actions. Fear, anger, sadness, and joy, they all have the potential to dominate our lives if left unchecked. But Seneca, like all Stoics, believed that emotions should not be our masters. Instead, they should be our servants. In his view, it is not emotions themselves that are harmful, but our lack of mastery over them. Seneca understood that destructive emotions like fear do not come from external events, but from our own interpretations of those events. He said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This observation cuts to the core of our emotional lives. Most of the fear, anxiety, and worry we experience are self-inflicted. We allow our minds to conjure worst-case scenarios, to dwell on what might go wrong, and in doing so, we magnify our suffering. The Stoic path is about taking back control over these runaway emotions. To master our emotions, we must first understand that they are not inescapable forces. They are responses that we can choose to influence. For Seneca, emotional mastery begins with reason. He taught that our rational mind must guide us, that we must analyze and understand our emotions rather than being swept away by them. Fear, for example, often arises from a misunderstanding of danger. We fear not the situation itself, but our imagined outcomes. Once we apply reason, we often find that the fear was baseless, or at the very least, exaggerated. Seneca's approach to emotional mastery is not about suppressing emotions, but about transforming them. When fear arises, the Stoic doesn't push it away or deny it. Instead, they face it, examine it, and decide how to respond. In his letters, Seneca reminds us the mind that is anxious about future events is miserable anxiety, like fear, stems from focusing on things beyond our control. By mastering our minds, we reclaim our peace. We stop reacting to life and start responding with thoughtfulness and intention. Mastering emotions also involves understanding their transient nature. Just as life is impermanent, so too are our emotions. Fear, anger, and sadness will come and go, but they do not define us unless we allow them to. The Stoic does not attach themselves to any passing emotion, knowing that it is temporary. This detachment from emotions allows for clarity of thought and action, even in the face of overwhelming circumstances. Seneca also warned of the dangers of being ruled by emotions, particularly when it comes to making decisions. He said, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." This is true for all emotions. When we allow them to dictate our actions, we often make choices we later regret. Mastery over emotions means making decisions based on reason and virtue, not on the whims of temporary feelings. Finally, emotional mastery involves cultivating the right emotions, those that serve us. Fear, when controlled, becomes caution. Anger, when tempered, becomes righteous action. The Stoic does not aim to be emotionless, but to transform destructive emotions into constructive forces. In this way, we move from being victims of our emotions to being their masters, and the fear of judgment. One of the most crippling fears we face is the fear of judgment. We constantly worry about how others perceive us, whether we are accepted, admired, or respected in the eyes of society. This fear seeps into our everyday lives, dictating our actions, shaping our decisions, and limiting our potential. But to live according to the wisdom of Seneca, we must rise above this fear, recognizing it for what it is, an illusion that binds us to the opinions of others. Seneca, echoing the core teachings of Stoicism, advises us to understand that the opinions of others are beyond our control. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. What does this mean? It means that the harsh judgments we fear are more often imagined than real. We torment ourselves with thoughts of how others might view us, thoughts that are rooted not in reality, but in our own insecurities. The Stoic path is about reclaiming our autonomy, our sense of self-worth, and not allowing the perceptions of others to govern us. Seneca teaches that true freedom lies in caring only about the judgment of one's own conscience, and living by our principles rather than the expectations of society. What is noble, what is right, this alone should be our concern when we anchor ourselves in virtue, in doing what we know to be good and just. The opinions of others lose their grip on us. But how does one transcend this deeply ingrained fear of judgment? The answer lies in understanding where the power truly resides. The judgment of others is external, it belongs to them, not us. What others think of us is beyond our control, and as the Stoics taught, we must not invest energy in what we cannot control. Instead, we must focus on what is within our power, our actions, our thoughts, our character. When we shift our focus in this way, a profound realization occurs: the fear of judgment is nothing more than a phantom, a construct that fades when we see it clearly. As Seneca said, "He who fears death will never do anything worth of a man who is alive." The same is true for the fear of judgment. Those who fear the opinions of others will never live fully or authentically. They will conform, they will hesitate, they will hide their true selves to avoid criticism or disapproval. But to live fully, to live courageously, one must abandon the desire for approval and embrace the path of inner integrity. The Stoic, therefore, does not waste time worrying about how they are perceived by others. They care only for the judgments that matter, the judgment of their own conscience, and the judgment of their character in the eyes of the divine. In this way, they rise above the fear of judgment, unshackled from the expectations of society, free to live a life of virtue and purpose. The fear of death, the ultimate fear. At the root of all fears lies the ultimate fear, the fear of death. It is the fear that haunts us in the quiet moments of life, the one we often avoid confronting, yet which subtly shapes our actions, our desires, and our anxieties. To live without fear, we must, according to Seneca, come face to face with this fear and overcome it. Seneca's writings are filled with reflections on death, not because he was morbid, but because he understood that until we make peace with death, we cannot truly live. He wrote, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a living man." This stark truth cuts to the core of human existence. The fear of death paralyzes us, holding us back from taking risks, from pursuing our highest ambitions, and from fully experiencing life. It is a fear that lingers in the background, silently dictating our decisions and fostering anxiety about the unknown. But Seneca offers a different perspective on death, one that is deeply liberating. He reminds us that death is a natural part of life, an inevitability that no one can escape. To fear death, therefore, is to fear the very fabric of existence. He wrote, "Death is non-existent. For when we exist, death is not present, and when death is present, we no longer exist." In this simple observation, Seneca reveals the futility of fearing death. It is not something to be dreaded, because it is not something we will experience. When it comes, we will no longer be. This understanding of death is central to Stoic philosophy. For the Stoic, death is neither a punishment nor a tragedy, it is simply the end of life's journey. And because it is inevitable, there is no sense in fearing it. Instead, we should focus on the one thing that truly matters: how we live. Seneca urged us to live each day as if it were our last, not in a hedonistic sense, but in a way that honors the fleeting nature of life. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. To live in such a way is to strip death of its power. When we live with intention, purpose, and virtue, the fear of death fades, replaced by a deep appreciation for the present moment. In facing the fear of death head-on, we find freedom. Seneca teaches us that death is not the enemy, it is fear itself that is the true adversary. Once we conquer this fear, we are free to live boldly, without hesitation, without regret. We no longer need to cling to life anxiously, trying to avoid death, because we know that death is not the end of our existence, but simply the conclusion of our time on this earth. The Stoic view of death encourages us to focus on what we can control: our actions, our thoughts, our character, and to release our attachment to things that are beyond our control. Death is beyond our control, and thus it should not concern us. Instead, we should live each day with the awareness that our time is limited, and in that awareness we find the motivation to live fully, without fear. A life without fear. To live without fear is the ultimate pursuit, the pinnacle of a life guided by reason, virtue, and inner peace. But what does it mean to live without fear? And how can we achieve such a state of existence in a world filled with uncertainty, judgment, and inevitable loss? For Seneca, and for all Stoic philosophers, living without fear does not mean an absence of challenges or adversities. It does not mean we will never encounter moments that test our resolve or shake our confidence. Rather, a life without fear is a life rooted in mastery over our reactions, a life where fear no longer controls us. It is the transformation of fear from a destructive force into a fleeting moment we meet with resilience, clarity, and strength. At the core of this transformation is the Stoic understanding of control. As we've explored, fear arises from our desire to control what is fundamentally uncontrollable: the opinions of others, the outcomes of our endeavors, and the ultimate unknown, death. When we strive to control what is not within our power, we set ourselves up for constant anxiety and dread. We become slaves to external forces, tossed around by the whims of fortune and circumstance. But the Stoic approach, as Seneca so clearly articulated, calls us to focus only on what we can control: our own thoughts, choices, and actions. When we internalize this philosophy, we begin to see that fear is often a misalignment of focus. We fear what we cannot control because we mistakenly believe it defines our lives. But in reality, the only thing that truly defines us is how we respond to the world around us, how we act in accordance with our principles, and how we cultivate virtue regardless of the circumstances. True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, Seneca wrote. This is the Stoic secret to living without fear, live in the present, guided by reason and virtue, without attachment to things that lie beyond your grasp. This is not to say that fear will vanish completely from our experience. Fear, like any emotion, will arise sometimes unexpectedly. But the Stoic does not allow fear to take root, to dominate their mind or dictate their actions. Instead, they observe it, acknowledge its presence, and return to the question that grounds them: is this within my control? If the answer is no, they release it. If the answer is yes, they act with purpose and clarity. In this way, fear becomes a fleeting visitor rather than a permanent resident. It no longer binds us or clouds our judgment. We act not out of fear of failure, rejection, or loss, but out of a commitment to what is right and good. We live fully, without hesitation, without regret, because we know that the only thing that truly matters is our character, the way we choose to navigate the challenges and opportunities that life presents. Living in the face of death. The ultimate fear, death, serves as a teacher in this Stoic journey. To conquer the fear of death is to unlock the greatest freedom of all. As Seneca reminds us, death is inevitable. It is the one certainty we all share, the one event no amount of wealth, power, or influence can prevent. To live in fear of death is to live in constant torment, avoiding risks, shrinking from life, and never truly embracing the present. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. This is a powerful reminder that death is not the enemy, fear of death is." When we accept death as a natural part of life, we are free to stop worrying about its arrival and instead focus on living well in the time we have. The Stoic does not fear death because they understand that death is not the end of existence, but the end of a phase, a transition beyond our control. What matters is how we live now, in this moment, with virtue and purpose. When we let go of the fear of death, we also let go of the fear of living fully. We are no longer paralyzed by the what-ifs or the desire for security. We no longer cling to a false sense of permanence, but instead we embrace each day with the awareness that it could be our last. This gives us a profound sense of urgency, not an anxious rush to accomplish more, but a deep appreciation for the present, for the simple act of being alive, for the opportunity to live with integrity, courage, and joy. Overcoming fear together. In this pursuit of a life without fear, we are not alone. As human beings, we share the same vulnerabilities, the same challenges, and the same fears. But we also share the same capacity for courage, for resilience, and for wisdom. As Seneca wrote, "There is no enjoyment in possession without companions." Stoicism is not a solitary journey, it is a collective one. We walk this path together, learning from each other, supporting each other, and reminding each other of the strength that lies within us all. When we confront our fears, we do so not just for ourselves, but for those around us. We become examples of what it means to live with courage and integrity, inspiring others to do the same. In this way, fear loses its grip not only on our individual lives, but on our collective experience as well. We become a community of individuals who live without fear, anchored in wisdom, virtue, and mutual support. The red thread of fearlessness. At every turn, Seneca reminds us that fearlessness is not about being invulnerable, or unshaken by life's difficulties. It is about mastering our emotions, understanding what we can control, and choosing to act in alignment with our highest values. When we release our attachment to external outcomes, we find a profound sense of peace that allows us to face life's uncertainties with grace and confidence. A life without fear is a life lived with intention. It is a life where we confront the fear of judgment by staying true to ourselves, where we embrace the impermanence of life by focusing on what truly matters, and where we transcend the fear of death by living fully in the present moment. In this way, we become unshakable, not because life has become easier, but because we have become stronger. This is the gift of Stoicism, a philosophy that empowers us to live without fear, to face life's challenges with courage, and to rise above the destructive emotions that hold us back. Let us, together, walk this path toward fearlessness, inspired by the wisdom of Seneca and the timeless truths of the Stoic tradition. In doing so, we will discover a freedom that is not bound by external circumstances, but rooted in the mastery of our inner world. This is the way to live boldly, authentically, and without fear. Thank you for watching until the end. Your time and attention mean a lot. I hope the wisdom shared here helps you on your journey toward inner strength and fearlessness. Stay strong, stay focused, and remember you have the power within you to face whatever life throws your way. Until next time, take care.